Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our session on understanding dyslexia and reading challenges. We are so pleased to have Lynn with us tonight. Lynn is I sent you her bio. She's the founder and president of the Colorado Literacy and Learning Center, which in 2020 opened Orton Academy, which is a school that focuses on dyslexia and reading challenges. And so we are blessed to have her come tonight to share her wisdom regarding how do we work with our scholars who struggle with reading, and also us as parents, just knowing how to handle that and to support them and to make sure that they're getting the best support systems in place. So as we start tonight's session, always we ask, if you can, turn your cameras on so that you can be engaged with the facilitator. We will have time at the end to do Q&A, but if you have a burning question or whatever and you want to put it in the chat that we can ask Lynn as she's going through her presentation, we will certainly do that as well. But again, thank you for being here. We're excited to be able to share this topic with you this evening. And so Lynn, I will turn it over to you, and you have the floor.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I apologize to Deborah and Rachel that I have had this tickle in my throat for about a month, and I think it might have come from a lot of smoke in the air. So if I get really raspy, I have got my cough drops here to get me through this. But I hear that we have parents on who are from public, private, charter, and homeschooling. And as the parent of 4 children, I have done 3 of those. And now with Orton Academy, I'm experiencing what is close to a charter. It's actually a contract school, but we operate like a charter. And just to give you a little of my background, I actually ended up getting into this field because I was homeschooling. Our oldest child was diagnosed with dyslexia when he was 6 years old. And my husband had told me when we were getting married, that he was dyslexic. And I thought, well, whatever that is, it must not be a big deal. He's one of the smartest people I've ever known. He did well in college. And so I really had no idea what dyslexia was. And child number 1 came along. It turns out he was dyslexic. He was very, very unhappy in school. And we had tried several different schools. So I ended up homeschooling. It was just going to be temporarily at first. And I also started taking him to a certified academic language therapist in Dallas, where I lived at the time. And after a couple of years, I kind of liked the homeschooling because I could choose the curriculum, and I found it was really fun. And but I thought, if I'm going to teach him at home, I need to know everything about how he learns. And so I went to the psychologist who had diagnosed him, and he told me about a program at Southern Methodist University. It was the learning therapy program. It's still there. And so I went back to school simply to help my own son learn how to read. So I've been there where you are when you worry about your child who struggles with reading. It turns out that 3 of my 4 now grown children are dyslexic. So, and 3 of the 4 are also ADHD, and only one gets away with only one issue. But I am just going to take you through a PowerPoint and try to explain a little bit about what dyslexia is. Like Deborah said, if you have questions as we go through, let me know, and I will leave time at the end to answer your questions. I'll give you just a little more of my background. Am I sharing? Can you see my... Yes, it says I'm sharing.
I can see it.
Okay, let me get the slides big. So like I said, I was in Dallas when I got into this field. I did 2 years in the learning therapy program, which I can tell you more about as well, because we also have a program here now at Colorado College and directly through the Colorado Literacy and Learning Center. We have cohorts in training. Besides the masters at Colorado College, we have cohorts in D20, D11, in Highlands Ranch, and in Monument. So we're trying to get as many certified academic language therapists trained as we can. But I did this and had started my master's at SMU, and we decided to move to Colorado. So when we got to Colorado, I continued and pursued my PhD, but I just felt like there was a big need here. And so in 2001, I started a nonprofit that has become the Colorado Literacy and Learning Center. We had a different name back then. And in 2007, I was encouraged to go before the Penrose St. Francis Hospital Foundation and apply for a grant. And they gave me a nice grant and provided space in the old St. Francis Health Center. And so that year we really were launched to provide children's services of evaluations and remediation, as well as start the teacher training. And so we have just grown from that until last year we were able to open Orton Academy. And it is truly a dream come true to be able to provide a free public education around dyslexia remediation. So that's my story. Now let's talk about dyslexia. There are a lot of misconceptions about dyslexia. Kids with dyslexia see letters backwards. She's not smart. Don't worry, your daughter will outgrow it. He's just lazy. It's a vision problem. Those are all misconceptions. Dyslexia is not seeing letters backwards. You wouldn't believe how many people in the world still think that dyslexia is seeing things backwards. It is not a lack of intelligence. It is not a lack of effort, even though sometimes our kids do begin to give up because the struggles have just beat them down so much. It is not a visual problem. In fact, if there is a visual problem, that problem needs to be addressed before we can even identify dyslexia. Dyslexia is not a visual problem, and it is not uncommon. That means it is common. Up to 20% of all individuals struggle with dyslexia. And it's not that simple in two ways. One, our writing systems are not simple. And there are a lot of comorbidities. Comorbidity means that the child is struggling actually with more than just one issue. For example, ADHD has about a 30% comorbidity rate with dyslexia. And if a child is struggling with dyslexia and you add to that they're struggling to attend, it makes learning almost impossible. There could be problems with executive function issues besides attention. Sometimes there are speech and or articulation disorders that are comorbid, and poor fine motor skills, which can lead to difficulties with writing, and we know that as dysgraphia, can co-occur with dyslexia. And these difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language that is often unexpected in relation to other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. So there are children who we know are the products of dysthesia, where they just haven't been given enough of the right kind of instruction. That is different from dyslexia. And the word unexpected is the one that I feel like really, for us as parents, we know something is not right with our child. Our otherwise bright child is suddenly in school and suddenly struggling with reading and or writing, and that is unexpected. Secondary consequences may include problems in reading comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede growth of vocabulary and background knowledge. So when children aren't reading, Up through third grade, their vocabulary grows mainly by what they hear. From fourth grade on, a student's vocabulary grows primarily from what they read. So when our kids aren't reading, then their vocabulary and background knowledge are not keeping up, it's not keeping up with their peers. So the key words in the definition of dyslexia, and I caught that my first slide, I was tweaking slides this afternoon, I shouldn't have been. I left the first part of the definition off, and that is that dyslexia is neurological in origin. It is inherited, it travels in families. My husband is dyslexic, 3 of my 4 kids are. Their brains are wired differently. Their brains are not broken, are dysfunctional. They just process print differently. Another key from the definition, the phonological component of language, was what is phonological? That has to do with the sounds that are in our language. That is the underlying deficit in most dyslexics. That means that dyslexia is a language-based learning disability. Where the fallout happens is with print, connecting speech to print. It's unexpected. And then I pointed out the secondary consequences of impact on reading comprehension and vocabulary. So dys means difficulty, lexia means words, and there's your definition again. Underlying it all is the fact that it is neurobiological. So some of the characteristics of dyslexia: early clues in young children, delays in speaking. When we do an evaluation at our center, we do a very thorough client history, and a big part of that is developmental milestones. So we ask about the developmental milestones of gross motor, of sitting, crawling, walking. But the really big ones we're looking for are language milestones: first words, first sounds, first words, first sentences, clear speech. Moving on from that, and having to do with language, is an insensitivity to rhyme. Rhyming is a phonological awareness skill, and dyslexic children tend to struggle with phonological awareness. Therefore, rhyming is something that doesn't come easily for them. Pronunciation errors, especially those that continue past 5 to 6 years old. For example, a young child says "pisgetti" for spaghetti, and that's really cute, and we giggle about it. But when a child is 7 or 8 and still saying "pisgetti," there's something not right. They can confuse words that sound alike, like maybe saying tornado instead of volcano. And they show frequent usage of imprecise words, like they refer to stuff and things rather than being specific about the words they use. More early clues include difficulty with word retrieval. They just can't get the right word they need. They struggle with or have failure learning names and sounds of letters. And that may sound so simple, but one of the biggest red flags for us is to look at an elementary child who cannot accurately name or write the letters of the alphabet. Now, singing the alphabet is not the same as naming the letters of the alphabet. They might be able to sing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but when you ask them to slow down and name each letter, they actually cannot say A, B, C, etc. They're usually weak in processing speed and working memory. Those are things that we pick up on in evaluations. And another really big early clue we need to be looking for is family history. We often ask, excuse me just a second, there's background noise in there. Sorry about that. I think someone's not aware that I'm talking to you right now. Family history. We will ask if there's a history of dyslexia in the family, and even when parents say no, there's not a family history of dyslexia. When we go on to say, well, did anyone struggle in school? Very often there's a case of Johnny's uncle dropped out of high school, or Sally's grandmother never enjoyed reading, or there's some connection to family somehow. It is very, very familial and genetic. Later clues, confusing similar words again, sight word errors, and I've got some examples here. Similar words like house instead of horse, walking instead of wanting, milk instead of like. They see those letters, they probably see the H and the S, and they're just making a guess of what they think makes sense. Our dyslexic students are prolific guessers because they don't innately connect the patterns that are in our language. Sight word errors are very, very common as well. Some of those errors could have their some, any friend, for any of you who ever want to get into this field, and I certainly welcome you. It's fascinating. But those first sight words that kids first start learning in elementary school come to us from the Anglo-Saxon layer of language. They're usually short words, but they don't play fair. They don't look like they sound, and they don't sound like they look. Dyslexic students have difficulty reading small words, and they confuse them or flat leave them out, in, on, the, of, and they do that not with reading, but they also do it with writing. And once again, guessing. They just become huge guessers. That's how they've been surviving. They could guess month for moth. Month is a more common word than moth. They might guess lap for lamp. And to continue, poor spelling, they can make those same types of mistakes in spelling because of the phonological awareness. They're not identifying every sound that they're hearing.
Lynn, there's a question.
Okay,
Is when should you
see it? I might need to do I need to do something to
no,
be able
you don't need to stop your screen or anything.
Okay, what is the question?
When should you worry about dyslexia when it comes to sight words?
I would start worrying in first grade. Because we start introducing children to sight words in kindergarten. Right. And here's the simple thing about dyslexia. The longer I'm in the field, the more humbled I am at what I don't know. Most of us who are not dyslexic, we see a pattern 7 to 10 times. Like, for example, cat, C-A-T. No one tells us that the A says ah before, because it's before a consonant. So we see cat, pat, rat, hat, mat, and our brains automatically made the connection that when A has something after it, that's a consonant, it's going to say ah. Our brains automatically do that. Dyslexics don't. Sight words are even more difficult because they don't play fair, but still 7 to 10 repetitions, a non-impaired child is probably going to start picking up those sight words. What takes a non-impaired child 7 to 10 repetitions to learn, it can take a dyslexic 50 to 500 repetitions, depending on the severity of the dyslexia. So that would be a red flag to me in a first grader, assuming that they have been exposed to language. Difficulty with rote memorization, and a big sign of this is the multiplication tables. Our dyslexic students really struggle with multiplication tables, and that doesn't mean that they don't have math skills. I have one son who has 2 masters in math and computer sciences, and one son who has a PhD in physics. They're both dyslexic. They struggled so much with those multiplication tables, I can't tell you, because that is a language skill. Learning the multiplication facts, simple addition, simple subtraction, multiplication. We're putting words to concepts. We're saying 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6, 3 times 3 is 9. So it's words. Let's go back to what dyslexia is. It's a language-based learning disability, and that's why it gets in the way of learning those silly math facts that we need to know. Excessive homework time. Our children need extra time. Even once we have remediated them, they still will need extra time just to process. A big part of the evaluations I do, I see all ages, but I do a lot of college students and graduate students and even medical students and law school students because they still need the extra time. And dyslexics often avoid public speaking or reading. I would say reading for sure. And one caveat to that is there are some very articulate people who are dyslexic. Quite a few politicians, actually. In fact, both Hickenlooper and Bennett, Senator Bennett here in Colorado, are dyslexic. I don't know if you were aware of that or not. Secondary complications, going back to that fact of the vocabulary and background knowledge growing more from 4th grade on by how much a child reads than by how much a child speaks. This is from Sally Shaywitz's book, Overcoming Dyslexia, and I imagine some of you have read that book. But here is the time spent reading each day. Less than 1 minute. A student is exposed to 8,000 words a year. 4.6 minutes a day, a student is exposed to 282,000 words per year. And 20 minutes a day, a student is exposed to 1.8 million words per year. That is a huge difference. Another important thing for our dyslexic students, and I don't think I got this in the PowerPoint, a great resource for our children is having them listen to recorded books. There's nothing wrong with that. They are still exposed to that vocabulary, and we want to keep them thinking where their brains are capable of thinking, not pull them down to being limited to what they're capable of reading. We want to pull up the reading skills, but we also want to continue pushing them as far as we can with what they're learning. So the bottom line, a child who finishes 2nd grade without being able to read has only a 1 in 4 chance of reading at grade level by the end of elementary school. And if we can reach a child at risk before 3rd grade, that same child has a 90 to 95% chance of academic success. Early identification is so important. We don't want to give up if we haven't caught the child before 3rd grade, but the sooner we can catch them, the easier it is. So what about B and D and reversals? So if you looked at this symbol right here, I'm going to give you 5 seconds to look at that symbol. Okay, if I ask you to write it down, could you? So Deborah, tell me if anyone's responding. Can anyone recreate that symbol? No, you probably couldn't unless you can speak Japanese. I think it's Japanese. It actually could be Chinese.
One person said yes.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm good for that person. That person either knows the language or has good visual imagery.
We did have one person who, Rachel, you had your hand up for a question. Some of the questions I'm going to hold till the end, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was just the questions that were in the chat, so I didn't know if you wanted to do
until
those.
the end. I'm copying them.
Okay.
So let's go back to the very beginning of the definition in the slide that I left out. And you can find this definition if you want to Google the definition of dyslexia from the National Institutes of Health. It is neurobiological. It's in the wiring. Up until 2007, dyslexia really was considered a hidden disability, but in 2007, functional MRI started being done on students with dyslexia. I've actually had a chance to be in a lab that does this, and it's absolutely fascinating to see the images. They have the one that I saw, I don't know if they're all like this, but it had like 4 quadrants on the screen, and each one shows a different angle of the brain as the student's reading. But now we know we have hard evidence of what is happening when a child reads. So during functional MRI, and is my cursor showing up? Do you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks. So if we were to cut the brain in half, and this is the left hemisphere, if you're looking at your head, so your ears here, your nose is up here, this is your left hemisphere. In typical readers, we see 3 areas of the brain that are engaged. This is this left frontal gyrus up here is where the brain processes sounds. Sally Shaywitz calls this the phoneme producer. We get back here to the parietotemporal area in the middle, and this is where sound symbol connections are made. And the back part of the brain where the vision processing is, the occipitotemporal lobe, is what is really activated when fluent reading is taking place. If we look at a functional MRI of a typical dyslexic reader, look where the brain is engaged. It's completely hung up here in the phoneme producer. It's struggling with the sounds of language. Here's another image of automatic versus manual readers. Again, here's the left hemisphere. So here's the sound area. Here is where we're doing more complex sound symbol correspondence. And back here is your automatic detector where fluent reading is taking place. So once again, the student with dyslexia, this is where the problem area is. Well, actually, the problem area is so much here that there is nothing happening back here. This is just a little slide of a phonological awareness continuum, just to show you briefly phonological awareness. And that is an awareness of the simplest sounds in English or in any language, getting more and more complex. And so we go back to the beginning of rhyme. And these are things we do with young children. Give me a word that rhymes with mop. So we want them to have an awareness of rhyme. We move up a step to alliteration. Which word begins with a different sound? Bit, bed, soup. Which one doesn't fit? So an awareness of sounds. We go to sentence segmentation. Clap one time for each word in this sentence. The house is big. The house is big. Then we take them up to syllable segmentation. So we want them to be aware of the syllables in words. And in our dyslexia remediation, we are so concrete that we don't even have them clap. We literally have them hold their chins so that they feel each syllable. Forgetful. Because when you have a syllable, your chin has to drop. We work on compound words. We move on to onsets and rhymes, onset being the first sound, the rhyme, R-I-M-E, being the final vowel sound and any consonants that come after it. And then finally, we can get to the point where we're blending and segmenting syllables. What sounds do you hear in pop? Up. What word do these sounds make? K, at. So we have to be able to manipulate and blend and segment those sounds, but it all has to start very simply. So how many sounds do you hear in these words? So first of all, let's look at these words. Splint. How many letters do you see? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But how many sounds do we hear? Sp, ul, I, n, t. Well, in that one, our sounds match our symbols that we're looking at. But let's look at this next word. Throw. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 symbols, 5 letters that make that word throw. How many sounds do we hear? O. We only have 3 sounds. Look at blank. How many symbols do we see? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. How many sounds do we hear? B, O, A, k. 5. That one matched. What about fix? How many letters do we see? 3. But how many sounds do we hear? I, k, s. Didn't match. We've got 3 symbols, but it had 4 sounds in it. So we have to create an awareness of this. So speaking is natural, reading is not. Our brains are hardwired for oral language, but reading is acquired. And it's the same process for all readers, dyslexic or not. It's just that it is automatic for non-impaired readers, and we have to have explicit direct instruction for dyslexic readers. Once again, approximately 75% of all children are going to learn to read whatever method of instruction they're exposed to, as long as they're exposed to it. This is an older image of effective instruction and changes in the brain before and after. So you can see before intervention, kindergarten here. Here's the left hemisphere. Here's the opposite, the right. You see there's a lot of engagement over here in the right hemisphere. There's not as much known about the right hemisphere and what it does. More research is coming out. We know that it is involved with creativity. So why it's so engaged here before intervention, I don't know, but you can see first grade after intervention, you are seeing some changes. There is more activation in the places where we want to see it and a little less in the right hemisphere for whatever reason. So Sally Shaywitz says that dyslexia is a weakness in a sea of strengths. Dyslexics often have incredible gifts, and I'm not going to say they're all gifted, because dyslexia is like anything else, and it falls on a bell curve, meaning that there are some at one end and some at the other end and most in the middle. But dyslexics, I believe every child has gifts. And some of the strengths we often see in dyslexia are reasoning, problem solving, comprehension skills, and I'm not talking about reading comprehension, concept formation, critical thinking, general knowledge, listening comprehension, oral vocabulary, and they're often creative thinkers and problem solvers. Do not let his dyslexia define who he is as a person. We always want to look for our children's strengths and pull those out. So how does dyslexia impact your child academically? Well, they have difficulty coping with large amounts of written words. There is often vulnerability to noise and movements, which I'm having a lot of right now because there seems to be a lot of background noise in my house. They almost always struggle with learning a foreign language, and a great recommendation for high school is to allow them to take American Sign Language, not to mention the fact that it can count as meeting a foreign language requirement. And there's an unusually strong interest in a narrow field of study and passionate interest in a subject. Emotionally, dyslexia can inflict pain. These students often have a very low self-esteem. And even as early as first grade, they can begin to be reluctant about going to school. They can start having lots of stomach aches or headaches or all kinds of other ailments because they don't want to go to school. So who is dyslexic? There are a huge list of people who have been very successful. Hold on just a second. I'm sorry, my husband doesn't realize I'm talking to you. Leonardo da Vinci, Steven Spielberg, Keira Knightley, Thomas Edison, Winston Churchill, Whoopi Goldberg, George Bush. There are so many famous people who, despite their dyslexia, have overcome. There is a wonderful documentary called Overcoming, The Big Picture, Overcoming Dyslexia. Some of you might have seen it. It had crossed my mind to show it to you tonight, but it's 45 minutes. And so I figured on top of this PowerPoint, you probably wouldn't be up for it, but I think you can find it online. It would be great for your children to watch. I'm sure we'll have a showing of it at Orton Academy. Anyway, it just interviews some very successful people who have made it despite their dyslexia and what it took for them to get there. Richard Branson, we might not want to mention him now, Gavin Newsom, because he's in so much trouble as the California governor. But anyway, they talk about making it despite being dyslexic. I just want to point out that a lot of the research behind what we know about dyslexia has, even though the research really started with Samuel Orton back in the 1940s, and a huge amount of the research came out of Dallas starting in the 1960s. Dallas is way ahead of the curve. Their public schools in Texas have had a dyslexia law in place since 1985. And we're just getting around to it now in Colorado, and we're not even there yet. But the National Reading Panel was formed in 2000 to look at reading across the country because approximately 70% of fourth graders were reading below proficient. And in 2001, the Child Left Behind Act came about. And the National Reading Panel pointed out the 5 components of reading that any good reading instruction should have: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Those are important for all children, but our students with dyslexia cannot read without direct instruction in all of those areas. Just more about research and the almighty dollar. Then along came the Reading First initiative, and that gave us Rti Response to Intervention, which is still in place. I'm sure you're familiar with that. Common Core State Standards came out, but we still have a lot of kids who struggle with reading. So why so little change in proficiency? Higher expectations in educational trends and societal changes. And we are trying to bridge the gap. The Colorado Department of Education has created the READ Act. More colleges of education are requiring some coursework in the science of reading for teachers. Believe it or not, many teachers come out of college without one single course in the science of reading and the structure of our language that kids have to know. If our teachers aren't aware of, if our teachers don't have this knowledge, how can they identify when a child is missing it? And we are getting more information out there about what dyslexia really is. So steps for parents. Listen carefully as your child begins to read. By second grade, they should be decoding multisyllabic words. Watch for those word substitutions, those little words, leaving those words out. Watch for the rhythm and prosody. The prosody of reading is the musical side of reading, the fluency. We do not speak like this, and we don't want to just read like this. Third grade and beyond, they should be learning and comprehending their text. Poor spelling, if there is one universal characteristic of dyslexia, how mild or how severe the reading is, they're almost always poor spellers. In fact, I think if you're a good speller, you can't be dyslexic. I will go that far. Poor handwriting is common. I'm not going to say all children struggle with poor handwriting, but it is common with dyslexia. We need to support parent awareness. Schools need to screen and progress monitor early. We need to respond with early intervention. And less support is necessary in the intermediate grades then, and this leads to greater success, happiness, and self-worth. And we can bump success up from 75 to 93%. So I mentioned that there are so many people in so many areas who have been highly successful despite their dyslexia. And there was a man named Stephen Cannell. I don't know if any of you are familiar with him. He has passed away in the past decade. He was an author, an Emmy Award-winning TV producer and writer. Right after I moved to Colorado in '99, I had a chance to hear him at an author's dinner in Denver, and it was amazing. It was amazing. He reminded me so much of a high school student I had just spent 4 years working with in Dallas before I moved up here. But he is the most prolific writer to date in the history of Hollywood. He wrote more than 350 episodes and produced or executive produced more than 1,500 episodes. He did the Rockford Files, if any of you are old enough to remember that. But this next slide I'm going to show you is an example. Oh, okay, let me back up. So Stephen Cannell was held back 2 years growing up. And guess in what subject? Anybody? He was held back 2 different years growing up. He talked about this in his talk. English. He was held back 2 different years because of English. So this writing sample I'm going to show you is not from him, but it was written on a computer by a 12-year-old dyslexic and dysgraphic student. And I can tell you, because I did all of my graduate work for my master's and my doctorate on dyslexia and written expression, if it had been handwritten, it wouldn't even be this easy to read. But would anyone like to attempt to read what this student was trying to say? Does anyone?
I'll try.
Okay,
I'll
go.
go.
Thank you.
The way I describe a bumpy ride is like what motorcycles make. The bumpy ride is like a song. The bump is a note.
You're doing good so far.
It's at the same time that that was the
You're doing great.
well, I teach ESL, so yeah, but once I get down towards the middle, it's like that was yeah, I'll stop there.
You did as good a job as anyone has ever done. So now I'm going to show you what the child, when he read it back to his teacher, what he had written. The way I describe a bumpy ride is like Wolfgang Mozart's music. Each bumpy road is like a song. Each bump in the road is a note. Each bump is uncontrolled at the same time it still is controlled. That was the magic to Mozart's music. It was very mysterious and unpredictable. So the next time you drive down a bumpy road, think of Mozart. So it is obvious that dyslexia and dysgraphia do not detrimentally affect creative ability or intelligence. So let's go back and look at that again. So it would be hard to decipher this. So we have to teach the rules to get the thoughts accurately on paper. Concluding thoughts: strengths should define the child, not their dyslexia. And the key to success and avoiding as much frustration as possible, recognize dyslexia and begin remediation as early as possible. Here are just some resources. You have access. Deborah, I know, is going to send this PowerPoint to you if you don't already have it. Our motto at Orton Academy is instilling hope, igniting purpose, empowering to achieve. And that is it for the PowerPoint. So now
we have some questions.
Okay.
So I'll start with the questions that we had in the chat, and if there are others, then I'll just ask you to come off of mute to ask your question, or you can also still put it in the chat. So the first question was, what happens when a child is bilingual and it seems he has some of the characteristics of a dyslexic person?
That is very interesting you ask. I am currently president of the Academic Language Therapy Association, and we've just approved this past year so certified academic language therapists it's a professional organization. These are dyslexia therapists who spend 2 years learning to work with students with dyslexia. This is who we have teaching our dyslexic students at Orton Academy. We had just voted this past year to do a bilingual CALT because dyslexia exists in every language. And so we have to identify, is it dyslexia, or is it the fact that the child's first language was another language? Was this a specific language? Was this Spanish?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there are, well, and the reason I'm asking that is there is a Spanish dyslexia intervention called Esperanza. It's actually on the CDE READ Act approved list, and we are trying to get that program going for our program at Colorado College here. We want to pilot it so that we can have bilingual therapists.
Okay,
But
thank you.
That's a problem. I mean, it's got to be someone able to evaluate the child. We actually have someone with CLLC who is able to do evaluations in Spanish. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Another question regarding difficulty with language. So if our child is intrigued with different languages, speaking different languages won't necessarily be a problem, but just writing, etc., would be the issue.
Not necessarily. Learning a foreign language, period, can be a challenge for a dyslexic student. But learning to speak a language is a whole different story, another language, than reading. They struggle with written language in their first language. They're going to struggle with it in their second. And these functional MRIs have been done all over the world. I mean, they have functional MRIs in Chinese, and it's still pretty much the same areas of the brain, even though that's a completely different type of language. That's a logographic language. So I don't know if I answered that question as well as you wanted or not, but the issue is you've got to dig down and find out if it's dyslexia or if it's just a struggle because it's another language, it's a second language.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Let's see. I think somebody asked a question about the movie, but it's Overcoming Dyslexia. Is that correct?
Overcoming Dyslexia is the book.
Okay.
And the movie is the big picture, Rethinking Dyslexia. It's
Okay.
a 44-minute documentary.
Perfect. Let's see. Do you have any experience with Erlens syndrome? A lot of symptoms overlap with dyslexia, so I'm wondering if my child may have both.
So I will tell you that the research does not support that Erland syndrome has any connection to dyslexia. So no, and I do not have, I mean, I'm aware of colored lenses, but I also am aware from working with students whose parents wanted them to wear colored lenses that it didn't make a bit of difference. Teaching them the rules of the language and creating the phonemic awareness is what makes a difference with dyslexia. If the colored lenses help a child, absolutely give it to them. But if that helps, then that wasn't dyslexia. That's not what dyslexia is.
All right. What do we do if our child has many of the traits that you mentioned?
Well, I would urge you to get an evaluation if you can. We are making sure that every student at Orton Academy has had a minimal evaluation because we want to know that those students fit a profile for success at the school. We can't guarantee that an issue that's not dyslexia is going to be helped by being at Orton Academy. So that is one of the benefits of our school is we are doing an evaluation. The teachers did a little bit of it this week. For those of you who are Orton parents, I don't know who is. And then Janie Harvey, who is one of our diagnosticians, and I are going in to wrap it up to complete that profile.
So part of the questions are coming that are any of these therapies covered by insurance? And then how do we get evaluations for our kids who might attend another school or private school or something of that nature?
So in general, insurance does not cover this. Some parents are able to get reimbursed by insurance from things like cafeteria plans or optional childcare, but that's an individual insurance thing. We have had quite a few school districts pay us to do testing for the kids because the schools don't test for dyslexia. So if a school doesn't test for dyslexia, it'll probably make the school district not happy, but they can be asked to pay for the testing. So
the question then also is, would Orton Academy do evaluations even if you don't attend there?
No, the school doesn't have the capacity. We're maxed out just trying to get all of the 150 kids there evaluated.
Okay.
So can I jump in here?
Yeah.
So I'm actually living this right now. My daughter's in a private school, and she has been in speech for going on 6 years and OT and stuff. Long story short, D20 was trying to give pushback, saying that she would have to go to a public school and go into the grade that she's not ready to go into, and eventually get around to testing her, which I'm a bear. I didn't take that. I actually have the handbook on what rights as parents we have to get our children tested. So right now I'm in the process of having them go to my daughter's therapy into her school to start testing her. What they're telling me is there's a way around it that they can test your child even if they're not in a public school setting. I just wanted to give that information out there because lady said it changed all the time, but currently the District 20, the education public school system cannot legally turn you away or your child for any type of testing. Not only that, she's going to be looked at by Brain and Body. It's another, it's a set of professionals that, look at the whole package, the psychiatric part to the, every dissection of the brain. So as parents, if anyone is struggling, you have to be your child's advocate, not back down, and it's your right. Have I gotten told a lot of times by people that just don't know what they're doing? No, and we won't do it. And they try to scare you with, oh, well, you're going to have to pay tons and tons of money to try and have your child tested when they should be tested, even if they're homeschooled or in a private school. So I just want to throw that in there for anyone that might need testing done on their child, because I'm kind of in that process now.
Thanks, Candace. Appreciate that. And that is true that you need to certainly work through whatever the district is that you're in, even if you don't go to the district school. Your child goes to another school or you homeschool, but whatever district you live in, then you have the ability to receive testing, not just for dyslexia, but for other things as well. Also, Candace did mention brain and body integration for testing. It's free if you have Medicaid. And so they will test for dyslexia as well as ADHD. And again, it is covered through Medicaid. So let's see. Where can you get the functional MRIs done?
I would say good luck. So some of the bigger centers that I know of doing it are Yale. That's where Sally Shaywitz is, the Yale Center for Creativity. The school that I observed in was the Georgetown Medical School. I don't know of any being done in Colorado. If they were being done, I don't think they're being done in Colorado. Probably the two biggest dyslexia researchers in Colorado are Bruce Pennington, who is at the University of Denver. He's actually retired, but he's still doing research, and Dick Olson at the University of Colorado Boulder. But I know Bruce is not doing, Dr. Pennington is not doing functional MRIs, and I don't think Dick Olson is either. The University of Houston, I think, has functional MRI. So I don't know. I've never asked how you have that done.
Okay.
I don't know how you on their list.
Yeah, probably can check with yeah, I don't know, medical doctor or whatever, or an MRR location, and see what type, if they do those types of tests.
I know we had a pediatric neuropsychologist on our board at one time, and he introduced me to a man from Pueblo who had a functional MRI machine, but it was being used for something else. Like, there are functional MRIs that are done, but for dyslexia, I don't know of anyone reading them for dyslexia.
Okay.
I think they might. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think they might actually have that capability at Brain and Body, because they were mentioning something like that. So I can let you guys know for sure.
And it looks like a couple of people.
Do they know how to read them for dyslexia? So
I would check in Brain and the link is has been put in the chat. So you might want to just check out Brain and Body. Let's see. Words. Let's see. Words well, but small words he struggles with and often guesses words or replaces them as he reads. I guess they're asking if someone like that. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I missed part of it. We read every night, but our third grader reads big words well, but small words he struggles with and often guesses words or replaces them as he reads.
It just depends. That's something that it would need to be investigated. We can't look at just one test to identify dyslexia. We have to look at a profile of scores from different testing. We test the phonological awareness. We test reading real words versus reading nonsense words. We test reading untimed word level list, but then we also test reading timed word level list. Spelling we have to check. So we have to look at a profile of all of these things. So just to say that your third grader is reading long words well, but missing the little words, it sounds like more attention, but I'd keep a close eye on it, because that is very characteristic of dyslexics to overlook the little words and confuse them.
Okay, excellent. Let's see. How do we train or help our children with dyslexia?
Well, they need to have the right type of instruction. We're very, very lucky in Colorado Springs that we have Orton Academy, Allies, and Encompass Heights now in District 20 that all have certified academic language therapists providing reading remediation. If any of you are so inclined and you have a college degree, we would invite you to come and get training yourself if you want to, especially if you're homeschooling. That would absolutely make the most sense. And then thirdly, try to find a professional who knows how to give your child the right type of reading instruction. It's not about a curriculum. A teacher who knows what to teach and how to teach it could use a stick in the sand to teach a dyslexic child to read. The problem is most teachers don't know what they need.
Okay. So part of that question also is that, are there classes for dyslexia on Saturdays or during the week, you know, that people can go to?
We have a cohort starting in Monument on September 10th, if that's a Saturday, and it is going to be spread out throughout the school year
Okay,
on
great.
Saturday.
Awesome, awesome.
Most of our therapy training is done in summer, where we do 3 weeks intensive in the first summer. We want to make sure they're ready to go out and start teaching. They come back for 5 seminars throughout the school year. They come back for another week the second summer, and then 5 more seminars throughout the second year. So it is a full 2-year, over 200-hour classroom instruction.
Okay, excellent. So families also, just so you know, in your resource list, Academic Advocates does some of this testing. So Lori Batar. So you may want to look her up. She's on that resource list that we sent you. So take a look at that. Some of these families have utilized Lori for tutoring and other things, but her initial assessment does some of the testing, and that's why she's referred some of our families to Orton Academy, because she thought that would be best for their scholar in terms of their academics moving forward. But again, that's a resource for you to look into as well. Let's see, then we heard simply reading lots of library books on dyslexia has helped my understanding of the topic, and then also how to support my son. So I would certainly agree that doing some of your own homework and then getting with others that are dealing with some of the same issues. Certainly what we'll do is that we can, you know, send this list out of those who are in attendance tonight, so that you can maybe contact other families that are also struggling with or have scholars that have dyslexia, and you guys can, you know, create your own cohort group and be able to share some resources. What exactly, Lynn, was the resource available on September 10th in Monument?
Oh, that is the beginning of a 2-year dyslexia therapy training course. Someone asked if there were Saturday programs on Saturdays.
Yeah.
Also, another organization you might want to be aware of is a very strong parent advocate group in Colorado called Co-Kids. That's Colorado Kids Identified with Dyslexia. I know they have a chapter here in Colorado Springs. I don't know how active they are. I know the Denver, some of the other areas of the state, especially around Denver, Boulder, are much more active, but Co-Kids is something you might check out.
Okay. So that's another resource to look into.
Can I share something that helped with my son? So Medicaid helped test him, and then like after you find out, we got to do the Take Flight program. And if you're low income, the Scottish Rite will base it off your income and they will help pay for it. And he did it in 4th and 5th grade. And like, I would just take him out of school at the end of the day, and it helped like tremendously. Like, it breaks it down for them and goes over the sounds, and it's just like,
that's the curriculum we use for training and at Orton Academy and at Allies.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's the same training they use.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it called?
It's Take Flight, a comprehensive intervention for students with dyslexia.
But for the Scottish Rite will help parents pay for it some if they needed it.
I didn't know that. Here in Colorado?
Yeah, if they just like, if you look it up Scottish, right? That's how we did it. And like, they paid the majority of it and it helped my son like tremendously.
What
Can
is
I
it? Put
ask
it
you
in
who
the
helped
chat
your
if you
son?
would.
What was that?
Who helped your son? Who worked with your son?
I can't remember her name. She was amazing though, but she moved right after. I can't think of what her name was.
Terry Brennan? Was it Terry Brennan?
Yes, it was Terry Brennan. Yeah.
He's one of my instructors.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, she was amazing with him.
She is amazing.
All right, so there's another resource. Excellent, thank you for that. And Lori has put that in the chat as well for you to look into that. There's a question that does Children's Hospital, do they have anything or do they do anything?
Yes. They have take flight trained therapists as well. Some of their learning specialists do take flight.
Okay. So
I
that was-
also want to say that with the Children's Hospital, we ended up going to Denver just because we got in faster, because in most places, or the one in here in the Springs was like almost a year out. And so I went to Denver and was able to get in like 2 or 3 months.
Okay. Someone did say that at brain and body integration, they waited for like 6 months to get testing. So there may be a wait list.
So when they got Kayla in, literally, they are booked out, but they have to at least be 6 years old. And when I called and made my appointment for Kayla, because she's not quite 6 yet, he didn't make it sound like, it was a 6-month wait list for anyone. So that might not be in the case. I don't know, but he didn't say there was any scheduling issues like it. So just a heads up to you guys.
Okay. For Tia, I'm assuming this is the question you're asking. Is there do you need a referral to go to brain and body, or are you talking about a referral to something else?
No, you actually have to have your pediatrician send a referral over to them. And then what you need to is, some probable cause, like, if they're already in any types of therapy, or, at a parent teacher conference, if they're saying, this, that kind of, you got to kind of prove your case, to not only the doctor, but them. So the doctor writes it up and refers them. That's how we did it anyways.
Okay, got it.
And this
All
was
right.
just,
well, I would just recommend that you call and find out what the parameters are, because they might be different for different situations. And at that point, if you need a referral, then you can seek one out. And if you don't need a referral, then you can get on their list and try to get you an appointment. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I will just end by saying that the Colorado Literacy and Learning Center is a nonprofit organization. So if any of you ever have questions, feel free to give us a call.
Excellent. Well, let's give Lynn some appreciation.
Thank
thank you so much.
We got a couple more questions that have come in. Hold on a second, Lynn. Is there anything we can do to start at home?
It's hard for me to answer that. Depending on the age of your child. For young children, some really good, easy to use parent books are called Explode the Code. And there's one that's Get Ready for the Code, Get Set for the Code, Go for the Code, and then there's Explode the Code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. They are very, very good, but they're not going to be the depth of the therapy that you would get from someone who has actually been through dyslexia therapy training. So if you want to do something at home and you know your child is dyslexic, I would encourage you to do what I did, and that's go figure out how to help them yourself.
Okay, but you got to find out if they're dyslexic so that you can know the right process to do that.
Right.
Okay. Well, families, as always, you know, if additional questions come up, certainly you can reach out to the, what is it, Colorado
Literacy and Learning Center.
Literacy and Learning Center to get more information. For those of you that, again, are making educational choices regarding where your scholars should be, Orton Academy, Allies 49, I believe District 20 has a school as well that's focused on dyslexia. Some district schools and even some charter schools may have testing availability and might provide a para for your child if they're experiencing that. So just ask the questions. You know that the importance of what we do is that you advocate for your child. And if you know that they're struggling, then don't just keep saying this too will pass and sweep it under the carpet, but look for ways to get them the support that they need. Again, we will, I will send, when I send the evaluation out for tonight, I will just take all your names and put them in the CC category so you'll know the other families that are on this list. And at that point, you guys look at that as an opportunity to connect with each other and see where you might be able to identify some additional resources to support your scholars. We have 3 door prize winners tonight. So Salvador and Natalia, and I know I'm going to pronounce their last name wrong, Pozos. Okay, and Stephanie.
Yes.
B. You know I won't ever pronounce your last name. And your husband smiles because he knows. And Candace Allgood. Those are our 3 door prize winners tonight. So you will receive it via electronic from, oh my goodness, Amazon. Thank you. I don't shop on Amazon, so I don't know what the name is. So, but thank you guys for being here tonight. And Lynn, thank you again for all the information that you provided. And families, again, reach out if you need additional assistance. Again, check with academic advocates, with Lori, because she supports families in helping to do some of this testing and getting them into the right schools and with the right resources to move forward. So again, thank you and have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.